what's happened also during the pandemic is a lot of people living in Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal have maybe chosen to move to smaller cities. And that was why we wanted to do this analysis of what are the best small cities in Canada for people that are considering a change of lifestyle or change of place for their business. It's not surprising that you would see cities like Victoria and Kelowna that we, especially living here in BC, know offer a great environment, great quality of life. Are popular for visitors, so they're popular as places to live. Some of the challenges with that attraction is that these cities, both Victoria and Kelowna, are not necessarily the best performers economically. So there's some work to do.
That's Chris Fair of Resonance Consultancy, the author of the Best Small Cities report that placed Victoria at number 1 and Kelowna at number 2 in Canada. We'll talk with Victoria and Kelowna's mayors, Lisa Helps and Colin Bazran, and Chamber of Commerce CEOs Bruce Williams and Dan Rogers when Today in BC continues.
From the latest community news to informative, entertaining reads for travelers and the cannabis curious, just visit your local Black Press Media community newspaper website to sign up today.
Today in BC is a Black Press Media podcast. Chris Fair is the president and CEO of Resonance Consultancy of Vancouver, the authors of the Best Small Cities report that has declared Victoria number 1 and Kelowna number 2. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
This is not the first time the company has put together a best cities list. You've been doing so for some time. South of the border, I understand.
Yes, we've been doing rankings of world's best cities and America's best cities for more than 8 years now. But being a company based here in Canada, we wanted to take a bit of a dive and take a look at some Canadian cities.
Where would be some of the cities outside of the U.S. and Canada that you've done?
We look at over 250 cities around the world, which includes 6 cities in Canada. So looking at cities with populations of 1 million plus in the metropolitan area. So that's everything from New York to London to Paris to Tokyo to Singapore and on down the list.
One of the things that really stood out for me reading the report was that in Canada, 82% of Canadians now live in cities. How long has it taken for that shift in society for us to become that urbanized?
That took about 100 years. When you go back at the beginning of the 1900s, less than half of Canadians lived in cities. And by 1980, it reached that 80% threshold, really between kind of that post-World War II through to 1980. And that 4 decades, there was mass urbanization. We always think of ourselves as having a lot of open space, and the world sees Canada as a place of mountains, prairies, lakes, and oceans. But in fact, we're one of the most urbanized countries in the world.
A number of other British Columbia cities made the top 25. Perhaps you could highlight those for us.
In addition to Victoria and Kelowna at number 1 and 2, North Vancouver came in at number 6. Kamloops, BC was number 18. Nanaimo came in at 20. Saanich over on the island came in at 23rd. And then we had Abbotsford was actually 26, just outside of the top 25.
To dig into the information a little bit, the report ranks the livability, the competitiveness, and the appeal of each city. How do you go about doing that, and what are the factors that are considered?
Our firm at Resonance has been working on tourism, economic development strategies, real estate development for more than 15 years, and we've done a lot of research to try and understand what is it exactly that attracts people to choose a city to visit or choose a city to live, or a business, why do they choose a city to invest? So the rankings based on our research are made up of those factors that have a positive relationship with either attracting visitors, attracting residents, or attracting investment. In many cases, some of these factors are the same, and they're wide-ranging from things like the quality of the weather to the quality and educational attainment of the workforce to how many very good restaurants there are and nightlife in a city. So we have, for this ranking, about 32 different factors grouped into 6 different categories that look at some of those core livability statistics, some core economic statistics, but most importantly, some core experiential characteristics as it relates to parks, outdoor recreation, nightlife, restaurants, culture, museums, et cetera, because those tend to have a positive relationship across all 3 categories when it comes to attracting residents, visitors, or businesses.
COVID has changed pretty much everything we know the last couple of years or so. Lots of folks moving, real estate appreciation. And in your report introduction, you said that along with the impacts of COVID, there'll be record numbers of immigrants arriving in the country over the next few years. And cities of all sizes are going to be facing some opportunities and challenges like never before. Could you expand on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, certainly one of the impacts of the pandemic, which we all felt firsthand, but maybe below the surface, what we didn't see or haven't seen was the effect of essentially turning off the taps on immigration for 2 years. We already had pretty aggressive targets of looking to bring in 400,000 new people a year into the country. So now we have a bit of catching up to do based on what's happened over the last 2 years. We expect immigration to not only recover, but surge this year and in the years that follow. But a lot of that growth is captured in some of our gateways like Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. And what's happened also during the pandemic is a lot of people living in Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal have maybe chosen to move to smaller cities. And that was why we wanted to do this analysis of looking at, well, what are the best small cities in Canada for people that are considering a change of lifestyle or change of place for their business.
Was there one piece of information after assembling this list of best small cities in Canada that kind of surprised you? Something that you stumbled across?
I think maybe the diversity. Obviously, there were cities across Canada that rank highly. So when you look at, I think it's not as surprising that you would see cities like Victoria and Kelowna that we, especially living here in BC, know offer great environment, great quality of life, are popular for visitors, so they're popular as places to live. But some of the challenges with that attraction is that these cities, both Victoria and Kelowna, are not necessarily the best performers economically. So there's some work to do. So just because a city is at the top of the list doesn't mean that economically it's one of the best performers. So there's that opportunity of like how do some of these cities that offer great lifestyle hopefully capture the post-COVID moment some opportunity to attract talent and businesses to their cities. And at the same time, there's other cities that are ranked quite highly, Fredericton or Lethbridge, Alberta, that I wouldn't have necessarily expected to see in the top 10, but you can see they have some real underlying strengths in terms of the educational attainment of the people that live there, cultural assets, quality of education and healthcare. And these are things that are probably as important or more important to us now post-COVID than they were before. So these cities have opportunities as well.
The information I found was fairly detailed, but broken down very easily depending on what you're looking for. Who do you anticipate would use this information and what would they use it for?
Primarily, it's from a tourism marketing perspective. Tour destination marketing organizations, tourism boards can look at this to understand what some of their key strengths are and what they should be promoting, and also what some of their key weaknesses are in terms of what areas do they need to improve on if they want to attract visitors to their city. And then also chambers of commerce, economic development organizations, city councils can use this information also to think about and prioritize what should we be investing in? Where are we deficient? Is it in education? Is it in healthcare? Is it in parks and recreation? So they can prioritize what they should be focusing on as it relates to their future planning. And that's the kind of work that we do with cities around the world here at Resonance.
Chris, is there a downside for being at the top of the best cities list?
There are some concerns for cities to be thinking about. It's great to be top of the list. And if you're top of the list, it's because you're performing well in a number of areas that makes your city desirable as a place to live or visit or do business. One of the challenges with that is we do see a relationship with the better a city performs in these rankings, they tend to have less affordable or less available housing. And we all know that housing is a crisis across Canada, but it's particularly acute in some of these cities. That really is the challenge of trying to balance the good fortune of having great assets, a good economy, good quality of life, but maintaining that, being innovative, aggressive towards new policies and ideas as it relates to increasing the supply of housing and the affordability of housing in these cities.
How do folks get a copy of the report?
The report's available at bestcities.org. You can view the rankings online, or you can download a full copy of the report there for free.
Thanks to Chris Fair from Resonance Consultancy for outlining the best small cities report for us. Lisa Helps is the mayor of Victoria. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Mayor Helps, we've been talking about the best small cities report for 2022, the first one. It's been released with Victoria number 1, Kelowna number 2, which is a great thing for British Columbia in general, but for Victoria in particular.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was an honor to be right at the top of that list. That's for sure.
What's the biggest misconception out there about Victoria, do you think?
I think there are a number of them. One is that we're still a small, sleepy town where people come to retire, and we certainly are that, and we welcome retirees from across the country and around the world. But Victoria has changed a lot in the last decade. The other misconception, I think, is that people think that tourism is our number one industry, and tourism is really important, and we love when people come to visit. But our number one industry is actually high tech. It's $5 billion a year and growing quickly. So I would say those are some of the stories about Victoria that are still true. Tourism is important, and we love when people come to retire. But the Victoria's news story is much bigger and broader than that.
If you had 3 words to sum up Victoria, 3 words, what would they be? Innovative,
caring, and future focused. Future focused is hyphenated, so it just counts as one.
Okay. So the report talks about the best cities to live in, work in, invest in, and a big part of the West Coast lifestyle is outdoor space, of course, and the city has had an ongoing commitment to green space and the biking culture for many years.
Victoria is probably one of the places with the best climate in the country at any given time of year, except this summer, actually, it's been cold. Really, we haven't rested on our laurels and just said it's pretty here and there's nice nature and we hope people come and enjoy it and move here and enjoy it. We've really worked hard over the past 8 years to build a world-class bike network. And it's amazing to see so many seniors and so many kids getting out on bikes. There are people who would always ride their bikes because that was just the way they got around. I'm hearing parents say to me, the thing their kid wants to do on Saturday morning is, hey, can we bike downtown? Because it's a thing they can do now quite safely. So I think the bike infrastructure has really probably put us up high on the ratings. I noticed in the report that Clover Point was mentioned, and we made a pretty bold move just last summer and opened Clover Point more to pedestrians and restricted car access to one side. And Clover Point, for those who don't know, it's the most beautiful place to get a view of the Olympics. You're right on the ocean. We put in some lounge chairs and some really great sturdy harvest picnic tables, and we see people really using it quite a bit. So we've made some investments over the years to enhance paradise, but arguably it is already paradise here.
You've been part of council in Victoria for more than 11 years, so that number one ranking must have felt pretty good. Job well done.
It really did. I'm heading out of office in October. I'm not running again. And I think Victorians sometimes have a misconception about Victoria. And I think sometimes it's because we want to make our city really a great place. So we look for all the things that are wrong so that we can fix them. But I think sometimes we're a little bit too down on ourselves, a little bit too negative about who we are and who we want to be. So to be at the top, best small city in Canada, I think was not necessarily a feather in my cap, but a feather in the cap of all the people who have worked so hard over the years to make this city what it is. All the people who said, yes, let's try that, even when we were trying something a little bit new or a little bit different. So I think the kudos for getting this top place goes to everybody in Victoria who really believes in Victoria. And hopefully for those who don't, this might give them an opportunity to do that.
As we're emerging from the pandemic, it's been pretty obvious the past couple of winters that Vancouver Island in particular enjoyed snowbirds from all over the country who normally might have wintered south of the border. How did that impact the local greater Victoria economy?
It was really good to be able to welcome people from across Canada because Victoria, we do get a lot of Canadian visitors. But in addition to that, a lot of our tourist marketing is to international visitors. With the pandemic, we saw those folks not come here. And it was really great to be able to welcome people from across Canada to come and spend the winter in Victoria or part of the winter in Victoria. I think relying only on Canadian visitors was difficult, but I would say that for our destination, Greater Victoria, and all the people who work so hard to tell the story of Victoria so that people come here and visit, last winter and the winter before could have been a lot worse without those Canadian visitors. So we're grateful for them coming and choosing Victoria to spend the winter.
I'm sure there's lots of issues the city is working on planning for the future. What in particular could you share with us about housing?
Right now, we are in the process of rezoning the city to make more way for missing middle housing, is what we're calling it, ground-oriented housing. Not everyone wants to raise their family in a downtown condo, and many people can't afford to buy a single-family home when the price is $1.3 or $1.4 million on average. It's quite a contentious process, I'll be honest, but to allow where there's only one single-family home allowed, we're working to create a zoning policy that will allow for up to 6 on each lot. The look and feel of those homes will be the same as the others in the neighborhood, nothing towering over anyone else. It's a really big move. I hope it passes through council. I worry that if we don't make that big move, we're really going to set ourselves up for failure over the next couple of decades in terms of Victoria being a place where families can make a life and make a living.
Very interesting. What would be the one thing you'd recommend to folks that they take in when they're in Victoria? Your secret spot? Is it a culinary spot? Is it a beach? Is it a biking trail?
Well, if I give away my secret spots, they're going to be all crowded. But yes, okay, here's a few. For people who want to watch the world go by, Swan's Pub right at the corner of Wharf Street and the Johnson Street Bridge. So Wharf, Pandora, and Johnson all come together there, sitting, looking out at the bridge, at all the bike and pedestrian traffic, and you get to drink good local beer. One of my favorite things to do is sit in the window and watch all the people moving by. The other is a bit more tucked away, but off of Banfield Park in the Vic West neighborhood. It's a secret swimming spot, not so secret anymore because the city has installed a big dock. It's warm. People think the ocean's cold, and mostly it is, but the Gorge Waterway is a great place to swim. So those are two highlights. You can go for a swim and then go have a beer, but don't do it the other way around. Don't have a beer and then go for a swim.
Mayor Lisa Helps of Victoria as we discuss the Best Small Cities Report. Bruce Williams is the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us today, Bruce.
Thanks for asking, Peter.
You are in the enviable position of having lived in 5 of the 25 best small cities in Canada. That's according to this 2022 report that was recently released. How did you manage 5 cities, and which 5 cities are we talking about?
I'll go in chronological order. I was raised in the town of Aurora, Ontario, just north of Toronto, which is on the list. Left Aurora, went to university in St. Catharines, Ontario, at Brock University, which is adjacent to another one that's on the list, which is Niagara Falls. Spent a lot of time there. Got into media. From there, I relocated to Kitchener-Waterloo. And Waterloo is on the list. But, you know, it's kind of like we'll talk about with Victoria. Kitchener and Waterloo are the same place, despite residents saying, no, they're not, but they touched. There's no boundary between them, really. I relocated at some point later in my life to Vancouver Island, where I lived in Nanaimo and lived there for a number of years. And then came to the South Island and lived in Saanich. And I work every day in Victoria, so I consider myself an honorary Victorian too. So that's the kind of path that I've followed, and that's how I've been able to enjoy these places.
Yeah, some pretty nice places there. Perhaps you could give us a snapshot of what attributes the Best Cities Report pushed Victoria to the top of the list.
There's a bunch of these things that happen all the time, and there's a lot of places that can make claim on being the best at something or the worst at something. Victoria, by a national standard, is a very expensive place to live, but that didn't necessarily factor into this. So this particular study involved 6 categories, all beginning with P, which are place, product, programming, people, prosperity, and promotion. So we win with the natural and built environment here. Victoria is a beautiful place aesthetically. The climate's wonderful. The remaining parts of the landscape that have carried on, like Mount Ptolemy and all those things that are just a beautiful part of who we are and what we do. Cities, institutions, that's like airports. We have probably the best airport in Canada, if not in North America, in Victoria. YYJ is an amazing facility. We have attractions because we're a tourist town. We have museums, we think, depending on what happens with our BCM, but that's a world-class facility. Amazing universities here, Royal Roads and Vic, and Camosun is an outstanding facility too. We have a great conference center, which is going to be expanding soon. We have a good sports scene. We have arts. We have culture. We have great food. We're getting much better at diversity. There are more and more new Canadians arriving all the time. We don't have what a lot of other places do. We don't have a lot of world headquarters here or corporate head offices, but we do have some very robust companies that are based here. Household income's pretty respectable. The employment rate is always the lowest in the country. And we show up on a lot of checks, Google checks and TripAdvisor and Facebook check-ins, just people checking out the experience of living and working here. So we tick a lot of boxes there.
Speaking of ticking boxes, Bruce, I thought it was interesting. Part of the rankings included standards, as you say, like TripAdvisory reviews, Instagram hashtags, and the like.
It's a pretty good experience to visit Victoria. I think, well, you've lived here in the past, like you said, and you have the opportunity to travel and be here quite often. But even those of us who live here realize that we live in a pretty exceptional place where the level of service is amazing. We're a world-class destination for people that come here both for leisure travel and for business travel. And pretty much everybody leaves thinking, yeah, you know what? I could live here. I could come back here. One of the great things about having a conference and business travel here is that people then decide when they get home to say, you know what, we should go back to Victoria when I don't have to work, when we can spend some time taking in the experiences that we have here. And pretty much any time of year is good for that too, because I actually had some friends that are still living in Ontario who were snowbirds that would normally go south, and they decided to come here during the pandemic because they couldn't travel, of course, but came out here, played some golf, hung out, did some takeout. It was wonderful for them.
How generally are businesses doing post-pandemic? Are they getting back on track in terms of supply issues and availability of workers and whatnot?
Yeah, there are challenges, the ones you mentioned with supply chain. That's certainly a factor, which in our case is made even more profound because of the fact that we're on an island, right? So the goods that are coming into this country that come through Port of Vancouver, for example, still have to go through some whole process before they return or come back to Vancouver Island. So that's a bit of a challenge for us. Worker shortage, absolutely. Whole bunch of factors. And cost of living, as we referred to off the top, is a factor for a lot of people. We know that there are people who are saying, I'm sorry, I can't work for you anymore because I can't afford to live here. People certainly at entry level are finding that. There was an acceleration of retirement as the pandemic came along. A lot of people said, you know what, I was going to pull the pin in a couple of years, so I'm out. Done. See ya. So those are factors. But in general, everybody is functioning at capacity right now, which means they are functioning to their fullest ability to offer the usual goods and services that they would provide with the available staff to do. Amanda and I went for a destination shop yesterday to a store where we had been meaning to go for quite some time. And we showed up and the sign on the door said, I'm sorry, we're closed today due to staffing issues. So that's a real thing that's still going on. And there's not going to be a short-term solution for that either. But we do, of course, have a return to fairly robust immigration very soon. Immigration has always been a primary source of workforce for us. Students, especially international students, will be coming back and they'll be entering the workforce. And as immigration comes back, not only the parental units within those immigrant families, but their kids are going to be available to work too. So those are a couple of things that are going to make it better.
Bruce, you mentioned the younger generation. I think the younger generation listening will be interested to know that the leading industry in Victoria is technology. So you've got all the beauty and outdoor living that makes for a great lifestyle. The challenge for them, as you say, is getting into the housing market.
Yeah, there is a challenge there. A number of people in the younger demographic, as I said, have left here because they can't afford to be here anymore. But at the same time, there are a number of younger workers who I think maybe have returned to the parental home and are doing the proverbial living in their parents' basement, even though houses here don't really have basements, but that's what they've done. They've come back to that, or they found alternate living arrangements. It's an interesting time just to watch and see what's happening right now. Younger people have lots of opportunity here. The growth of technology, even the fact that we're doing this interview via the platform that we are, technology is embedded even greater into our lives now. Artificial intelligence will become more and more a part of what we do. So people who grew up fluent in technology will have the opportunity to grow within this economy, which will be more and more reliant on technology, whereas older people, for example, like me, who don't fully get it all, will be relying on younger people to guide me down the road to better take advantage of the technology that we have in place. And we also have to make sure that all businesses, large and small, have equal access to the fullest capacity of technology they can get, because it just doesn't mean that the big guys can afford to put all the technology in place. We need to have small and medium businesses have access to technology too. So
what would be the one thing that you would recommend to folks that they take in when they're in Victoria? Do you have a secret spot, great dining spot, swimming hole, beach, activity? What's your favorite thing to recommend for folks?
As I referred to off the top, this is a bit of a regional win. Saanich is identified on this list, as is Victoria. But just across the region, people joke about the fact that we have these 13 municipalities, we have 10 nations. Each of them, though, has its distinct culture. So it depends on the experience that you're looking for. Amanda and I lived rural for quite some time. We lived in District of Highlands, which is a very rural area. Everybody is on well and everybody's on septic. We moved into town so we could drink the water out of the tap. The endless beach experiences here are amazing. You don't have to go very far to find a really cool culinary experience with the diversity of restaurants we have. It's funny, we did something that we hadn't done for a number of years. We went to the top of Mount Ptolemy, which is a place where you can get a panoramic 360-degree view, if you will, of this entire region. And it's spectacular just to take a look at it and see the diversity of what we have, and to make note of the fact that we still have a lot of trees here, which is a good thing. That makes for a healthier community too. So do I have one specific secret place? No, not really. I tend to gravitate to the water, though. I find it very calming. And you have that ability to do the same in so many of the communities that we have here on Vancouver Island. But Greater Victoria is exactly what it says. It's the sum of all of its parts. And each area in this region is quite spectacular on its own.
When Barb and I moved out coast to coast from the east to the west, we were astonished, really, by the number of parks and green spaces in Victoria. So we're going to put Mount Ptolemy on the top of our list and do that soon.
Yeah, do that for sure. And bring your bike. Amanda and I are cyclists and we ride as much as we can. We have a spectacular bike network throughout this region and across the city, which still does have some people not quite on board, but that tells me that they don't have a bike and they haven't done that. And they don't realize how accessible it is to take a ride through something like the Lochside Trail that takes you through a region that you would never see from the roads that you're driving and walking on all the time. The Galloping Goose and the ENN Trail and Lochside Trail, all of them are spectacular. Having become more avid cyclists, we bought e-bikes, which means we can go further because I don't wear out so fast. But that's also another amazing experience.
When Today in BC continues, we'll be talking to Mayor Colin Basran and Chamber of Commerce CEO Dan Rogers about Kelowna and what makes it Canada's second best small city.
Why spend hours searching dealerships, comparing makes and models? Find the best of BC's inventory in one place, todaysdrive.com. You'll have access to inventory across BC, where you can easily find a vehicle that fits your needs and gets you where you need to go in comfort. Get in the driver's seat. Don't miss out on the many options we have available for you. Powered by Black Press Media, todaysdrive.com connects you with exclusive new and used car deals.
Today in BC is a Black Press Media podcast. Colin Basran is the mayor of Kelowna. Thanks for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
The Best Small Cities Report is what we've been talking about. Kelowna checks in at number 2. And as the saying goes, you learn something new every day. I learned from reading the report that over the past 2 or 3 years, Kelowna is British Columbia's fastest growing city, if not Canada's fastest growing city.
Yeah, we're really proud of that. In fact, between the past 2 census collected and distributed, the city of Kelowna is the fastest growing city in Canada with the 3rd fastest growing downtown. We've been really trying to focus on our urban center growth as opposed to sprawling as a community, as many North American cities have over the decades. And as a result of really great plans we've put in place to dictate how our city grows, we're starting to see those plans come to fruition and build this amazing city that we've known we've had for a long time, but now it's just happened to get noticed, not only across the country, but internationally. So it's pretty cool. And we're really proud of being second on the list. We'll catch Victoria maybe next time.
How is the real estate business keeping up with that influx of people?
Oh boy, real estate certainly is a topic of conversation for most in our community, because I'm sure you can appreciate, as popular as we've become, it's obviously created some challenges for us. Challenges that we're hitting head on with some really great plans, but certainly housing affordability is a tricky one, and it's real, and it's happening across all metropolitan communities in Canada. So it's no different here. The cost of an average home is near the $1 million mark. It's becoming a real challenge for people to be able to purchase homes. So we're doing what we can as a city to get supply to the market. For example, last year, we approved over $2 billion worth of building permit values. Just to put that into perspective, the city of Surrey in British Columbia is about 10 times the size of Kelowna, and they've approved about $2.9 billion worth of development permit value. So when you consider that we were over $2 billion, it just gives you an idea of how busy the real estate market is here, but also how excited we are about the fact that people want to invest in our community. We are now seeing not just local developers building product here, but we are seeing developers from the Lower Mainland, right across the country saying, hey, Kelowna is a place we want to be, and they're investing here. We're also seeing, and whether people like this or not, we're seeing the big investment firms, Ontario Teachers Pension Fund and others, purchase rental buildings here. So Kelowna is on the map, as evidenced by placing number 2 on this small cities list. It doesn't appear that things are going to slow down because we're not one industry dependent. We have a very diverse economy. And of course, one of the biggest draws to Kelowna is the lifestyle. The lifestyle draw will always remain. And as a result, while you may see real estate markets really decline in other markets, we don't see that happening here in Kelowna because we will always be a place that people will want to retire to move to start a business here, in large part due to the amenities and the lifestyle.
Let's talk about that investment for a second. Like Victoria, technology is pretty big in Kelowna, headquarters for Disney Canada even.
So we have been very deliberate, too, in our growing of the technology sector in Kelowna. One of the things that I'm most proud of is partnering with one of the former founders of what has now become the head of Disney here, Club Penguin was the company that really put Kelowna on the tech map, which was purchased by Disney. There were 3 founders there who were part of growing Club Penguin into what it became and then sold to Disney. They had their option of taking their money and investing it anywhere else in the world, but they chose to stay and invest it here. And one of them was instrumental in helping create something called the Kelowna Innovation Center, which is a tech hub, a place for tech businesses to learn and to grow. It also houses our tech accelerator called Accelerate Okanagan, one of the best tech accelerators in the country. So it's really something we've deliberately tried to foster. The last economic impact study we did for tech was actually pre-pandemic. We know it's grown since, but a few years ago, it was a $2 billion economic impact to the region. We're talking about 13,000 jobs. And more than half of those were taken up by people who were 35 years of age or younger. We are getting younger demographically. Kelowna used to be known as a retirement destination, if you will, but now we are seeing more and more young people. We're seeing families move here. One of the reasons why I got involved in politics is because I grew up in a time when my friends couldn't wait to graduate from high school and get out of here because there was no opportunities for them. They couldn't see a place where they gain meaningful employment and support a family. All those people now are trying to figure out how they come back. And I'm really proud of the job that we've done to grow the economy, make it more diverse so that there is great opportunities for people to come back or to move here to call Kelowna home.
When I think of visiting Kelowna, I think of the wineries, the restaurants, and doing some shopping on a hot and dusty day.
I think we are right now poised to see our busiest summer in our city's history, given all of the pent-up travel demand that people have had as a result of the pandemic. I would not be surprised if we surpass 2 million visitors this year. One of the reasons why the economy is so strong here in the Okanagan is due in part to our airport, which is one of the few city-owned airports in the country. It's the second busiest airport in the province. We've seen investment in and creation of the aviation sector, which is playing a major role in driving our economy here as well. Our airport per capita is actually leading the country right now in terms of recovery, getting us back to pre-pandemic levels where we had over 2 million passengers visit our airport per year. So there's a lot of encouraging signs, and I think that we're ready to welcome visitors back. I think that it's going to be a very busy summer here in Kelowna.
Did you see a big increase in snowbirds over the last couple of winters because of the pandemic?
We did, in the sense that they couldn't travel or just felt like they wanted to stay closer to home. We most certainly did see that impact. It was a boost to our economy, obviously, given that we are known for our warm weather and our beautiful summer. But we also have year-round reasons to visit Kelowna. And certainly the snowbirds who didn't leave helped bolster that off-season, if you will, by still being in town, supporting local businesses, going to shows, performances of some of our great artistic companies. We're certainly happy to have them stay home. It'll be interesting to see what the travel patterns are now coming out of the pandemic and to see what our snowbirds do this coming winter, because I think a lot of them who end up staying here have no doubt enjoyed themselves and realized that, you know what, maybe we don't need to head south, that there's a lot of great things happening here. That's definitely something we're keeping an eye on.
You touched on it. The report shows that Kelowna is a very active hub for arts and entertainment.
We are blessed with talent, and we have artistic companies here in our community that punch way above their weight class. We have a ballet, a symphony, an opera that I would put on par with any major city in Canada. They are attracting artists and performers from around the world, and we are so fortunate that they call Kelowna home. The artistic scene is definitely on par with, and I think that's part of the misconception about our city, is that it's, for those who have never visited here, perhaps they have small town in mind, but we have all of the amenities of any big city, whether it be arts and culture, whether it be culinary. You talked about wine, shopping, and then our natural amenities. So you put all those together, and I think that people who are visiting here for the first time, who also realize that we have a university that now has over 12,000 students per year on campus and growing. We have the regional health facility here, and it's seen significant investment where now people no longer have to travel to Vancouver for very complex medical procedures. And it's all done here at our regional hospital now. People, I think, are pleasantly surprised that this is really a big city, but with a smaller community feel. We're really proud of it.
You're very passionate about it, Mayor Bazran. I'm going to give you 3 words to sum up Kelowna. Just 3 words. What would they be?
Yeah, that's tough. I was giving that some thought. I was like, geez, what would those 3 be? So I think the first one will be progressive. We are building a really progressive city. And as I mentioned earlier, we're doing things differently than have been done in the past when it comes to growing our community. I am blessed with the best municipal staff in the country who are the leaders in their various different areas of expertise. We're doing some really progressive things in terms of how we grow our community. I would say another word to describe Kelowna is inclusive. We have worked very hard to say that everybody who wants to call Kelowna home, regardless of who you choose to worship, the color of your skin, whom you choose to love, how much money you have, we want Kelowna to be a place that is a place for everybody to find their way and to feel like they belong. So that's very important to us. So inclusive is another word. And I think the other word I'd use to describe Kelowna is leadership. We have really great plans in place to deal with some of the issues all cities are being faced with right now. Homelessness, mental health, addiction, housing affordability. And the city of Kelowna is being asked by municipalities right across the country in terms of our plans to tackle some of those really key issues. And I'm really proud of the fact that we are leading on many of those fronts and have helped the provincial government, for example, develop policy and plans to deal with some of these issues that they are directly responsible for, yet end up feeling the effects on our streets. Like I say, I love our city. Really proud of the fact that we're number 2 on the list across the country. There's always room for improvement, don't get me wrong, but there are some really great plans in place to deal with some of the issues we're all facing.
Here's your chance to wind things up with the one thing that you'd recommend to folks that they take in when they're in Kelowna. Could be your favorite pub, could be a swimming hole, could be a place to go and meditate, whatever you like.
Of course, our biggest natural amenity is our lake. And anytime you can get in the water on a paddleboard or on a boat and just get out in the middle of the water and look back on the city, it's a feeling that's hard to beat. So anybody who's visiting Kelowna, I highly recommend you get out on the water. Even better if you can responsibly enjoy a locally crafted beverage of some kind while in the boat. Again, to be enjoyed responsibly makes it even better. But you know what? You just can't beat a day on the water.
Mayor Colin Bazran of Kelowna. We're going to round out our podcast discussion on Today in BC about the Small Cities Report with Dan Rogers, CEO of the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Peter.
Mayor Bazran mentioned that along with Kelowna being the fastest growing city in British Columbia as part of the Central Okanagan, that the downtown area was the 3rd fastest growing in Canada. Is that across all sectors?
It's primarily based on population and density. And if anybody that hasn't been to the Central Okanagan and Kelowna lately, it is significantly different than it was 5-10 years ago. And certainly if you haven't been here anytime previous to that, it's dramatically different. There are high rises all along the water and many more in the plans. In fact, UBC Okanagan is planning a downtown campus, and it will have a 46-story building that will hopefully be breaking ground in the next year or so. There's some exciting times. They're building up and they're increasing density. So it's a major metropolitan area, that's for sure.
Okay, the city is growing at a 14% clip according to the numbers we've read. Are there any sectors that are lagging behind in growth? In other words, what opportunities might be there?
We primarily, and if people have known Kelowna, Peter, and the Central Okanagan, tourism and agriculture have been the foundation for us. And with both of those opportunities, there's lots of entrepreneurs that are in the area that are looking at, the opportunities in tourism and even agriculture. And that extends to now cannabis. So we've become a bit of a hub on the cannabis side, and that means research and development. But I think manufacturing is where, from our perspective, we'd like to see that grow. We have an international airport that is number 10 in the country, surpassing even Victoria pre-pandemic for the total amount of traffic through it. So it's a bit of a jewel here, and that gives us a gateway to the world, frankly. And we know that means we can develop the light industry and manufacturing a lot more than what we currently have, and there's great opportunity there.
The mayor touched on it. Could you expand on why Kelowna and the Central Okanagan is such a great place for entrepreneurs to set up shop?
Well, I think the quality of life here, and I've lived all across BC from Vancouver Island to northern BC, they're all great places to live. But the lifestyle and the opportunities, the diversity of our economy creates a lot of different directions people and entrepreneurs can go. Having a world-class university in UBC Okanagan, along with Okanagan College and the business school, also supplements that opportunity so that people can grow and learn from some world-class post-secondary institutions that exist here. And that's driving the opportunity. So it's always been part of the spirit of those that go into business here. They're entrepreneurial. We see it in almost every aspect of life here. They believe in doing things themselves, investing in themselves and growing and risking. And that's part of being an entrepreneur. The great thing is, whether it's the tech sector, the growth in the film as well, it's pretty diverse, not just foundational pieces from tourism and agriculture, but there's much more that's evolved over the years here.
You mentioned it. How is the TV and movie industry doing these days?
One of the things that we monitor here at the Kelowna Chamber, because we invest quite a bit on the advocacy side and the policy, we monitor what government policies are put in place. And, this is a highly competitive sector. It's huge in the Lower Mainland. We don't get quite that, but we do get elements on the digital art side. And the tax breaks that are available for regional productions makes a huge difference. And we've seen that tangibly. In fact, just outside my office in downtown Kelowna, there was a television crew there last week shooting a commercial. There's some major productions that have occurred over the last couple of years, despite the pandemic. So we've seen some movie productions. But it's so tight, government has to keep an eye on that and make sure that we're competitive on a global scale to attract that type of production and business development outside of Metro Vancouver. And so far, it's been working pretty good with those regional tax credits that exist.
Dan, if there was a misconception out there about Kelowna, what would you say it was?
It ain't what it used to be. We are a long ways from a sleepy little retirement village. When I grew up, and I won't tell you how long ago, Peter, that was, but growing up on the island, we used to go to the small little town after we escaped out of Victoria. We are now a bustling metropolis with high-rises all along the lakefront, dozens more in the plans, a tech hub, a university center. There is so much more going on here. And it's not just Kelowna. Kelowna draws the attention because we're the hub city and we're growing at a high rate. But we have Lake Country just up the street, which is basically a suburb of, with all due respect to the Kelowna and Central Kelowna. We have the city West Kelowna across the lake. And we've got the pillars of Penticton and Vernon on one side or the other, an hour away. So Kelowna is the hub, but the entire region will grow for many years because there's so much to offer.
Okay, you've got a podium here. What would be the one thing that you would recommend to folks they take in when they're Kelowna? This could be your secret spot, your secret activity, whatever you'd like to share with folks.
It's the diversity, Peter, frankly, and the multiple seasons that is one of the great things about Kelowna and the area. This is one of the things that I quite often say to friends. On a particular day in the springtime, I can be skiing in the morning and then get off the ski hill and enjoy what Big White has to offer, zip down and get a round of golf in. Personally, my favorite is the development of the rail trail, the conversion of the old CN line that now stretches all the way from Vernon into Kelowna. It's a multi-youth path. If anybody's been to the island, they know the Galloping Goose Trail. Just consider that, but with a lake all the way for miles and then kilometers down the road. So it's breathtaking to be able to use that trail and integrate it with the other trails, whether they're north or south of Kelowna. Lots of opportunity to enjoy the outdoors, no matter what season it is.
Thanks to Dan Rogers of the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce as we've been discussing the Best Small Cities in Canada report. I'd also like to thank the author of the report, Chris Fair from Residence Consulting, Victoria Mayor Lisa Helps, Kelowna's Mayor Colin Bazran, and Chamber CEO Bruce Williams in Victoria. If you have suggestions or comments, send us a voice message to podcast@blackpress.ca. You may be part of our podcast mailbag segment. You'll find Today in BC podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, and Google Podcasts.